of the Victor Prep Vocab podcast. It is Thanksgiving week, which means in a few days everyone is anomaly. Anomaly, spelled A-N-O-M-A-L-Y. It's a noun, and it's fairly simple. An anomaly, that's tricky to say. An anomaly is anything that deviates from the normal, something that deviates from what's standard or expected. So, in our lives, we'll have an idea about what's normal, what's the expected thing that's going to happen in any given situation, and that's based on our experience. So, we expect chickens to act in a certain way, they strut around a certain amount, they peck at the ground. If it's a cockerel, they'll crow, right? So we have this idea of chickens, but if we encounter a chicken that is strangely friendly and keeps wanting to run up to us and jump on our shoulder and rub his beak on our face, then that might be an anomaly. That is something that's deviating from the normal. It's an oddity. Some other synonyms of anomaly are peculiarity, abnormality, inconsistency, irregularity, aberration, or rarity. Our second word is wizened. Wizened, spelled W-I-Z or Z, E-N-E-D, wizened. It's an adjective, and wizened means shriveled or wrinkled with age. And this is almost always used to refer to an old man. Every time I've encountered this, it's always a wizened old man. I don't know why it's never a wizened old woman. I'm not saying anything by that. I mean, anyone can be shriveled or wrinkled with age, regardless of gender. But for some reason, this is almost always used for an old man. And sometimes it's used for wizards. Like the archetypal Gandalf-type wizard with a long grey beard and wrinkles. So wizened to mean wrinkled with age, someone extremely old-looking. Now, wizened, what's interesting about it, there isn't really a negative connotation there, it's just descriptive. In fact, it might also be more slightly positive than it is negative. There are some words which have a slightly more negative sound to them, like shriveled up. Shriveled up, for me, just sounds almost kind of nasty. Because you imagine things shriveled up, it's just unpleasant sounding. Whereas wizened, and maybe because of the way it starts with the W-I-Z, makes you think of wise or wizard. And I think because it so often is used for things like wizards or wise old men, wizened for me has that. It's not the worst thing to be described as. When I'm an old man, if someone described me as wizened, I wouldn't be as insulted as if someone described me as being shriveled up or pruny or gnarled, something like that, or shrunken. Anyway, but getting quite into this. But some synonyms of wizened are wrinkled, lined, creased, shriveled up, as I mentioned before, withered, weather-beaten, shrunken, gnarled, and aged. This word has a fairly interesting origin. It has a Germanic origin. And apparently there was an ancient, archaic German word, wizen, which I'm guessing was probably pronounced something like Weisen, and it meant shrivel, to be shriveled up. So Weisen then got this other meaning, a sense of age, to be shriveled or wrinkled with age. Our third word is tangential. Tangential, spelled T-A-N-G-E-N-T-I-A-L. Tangential. It's an adjective, and it has the technical meaning of relating to a tangent. So a tangential line is a line that touches something but doesn't intersect it, if I remember my maths correctly. So tangential can mean relating to a tangent in the mathematical sense, but you're more likely to encounter it on a test or in writing when it has this other meaning. Tangential means something that's just barely touching a certain subject or a certain matter. It means peripheral. So if you're talking about soccer and you're talking about, say, a manager of a soccer team, a tangential matter might be something relating to a manager of another sport, like a rugby team. So if someone's talking about this manager of the soccer team and you say, oh, well, I have this other subject about a manager, and it's not really about the same thing. So, but it's sort of touching the matter, but it's not really in the thick of it. So you can see how it derives from that meaning. So when something is tangential, if you have a tangential line, it touches a circle. If you draw a circle and draw a tangent on it, it will touch the circle, but will never go inside the circle. So it's not really going deep into that circle. It's just touching it. It's not totally related. Maybe it's close to it. And so you can see how this other meaning of a tangential subject is something that's just a bit along the lines of what we've been talking about, but not completely related. There aren't really many good synonyms for tangential, but two that roughly similar are extraneous and unrelated. Now, our fourth and final word is jettison. Jettison, spelt Jettison. Jettison. It's a verb, to jettison, and it has a very specific meaning. To jettison something means to throw or drop something off some sort of vessel. So, by vessel I mean usually an aircraft or a ship. I suppose vessel could also mean a spaceship or a starship, but we don't really have many of those, so unless you're reading a science fiction novel, jettison is usually going to mean dropping something from an aircraft or a ship. You might say, hey Sam, what about a car, right? That's a vehicle of some kind. Well, technically I suppose you might be able to jettison something from a car, but it's just not really, a usage that ever happens. Just because of the history of the usage, because it comes from this idea of throwing something off a ship to make the ship lighter, so it might float better. So if you're in a ship and pirates attack, they fire cannonballs at your ship and you're sinking, and you think, oh no, right? We're going down. You want to throw stuff off, you throw the heavy stuff off your ship so it floats better. And so hence you jettison things. Comes from Old French, a word jettison, which meant to throw. So it's always been used with a sense of throwing stuff off your ship or an aircraft to make it, in a case of distress, you're going down in some way, so you jettison. Now, in a modern usage, it's used in that way, and it also has, you can also use it to say just abandoning something or discarding something. So you could technically say, I'm jettisoning that person from my life. It's not a perfect usage, but it works, right? Synonyms of jettison are dump, drop, discharge, ditch, throw out, unload, or throw overboard. Now, my example sentences to test to see that you understand all these words. The